is the second part of the candidate forum for candidates for Mountain View City Council. And we are hosted by Silicon Valley at Home. And so we're just going to start off with a few questions. The first set of questions, candidates will have a chance to talk for 2 minutes each. So 2 minutes to answer these questions. So let's get started here. And the first person will be, oh, let me introduce the candidates. So our candidates are Mayor Margaret Abe-Koga. She's down there. We also have John Lashlee. He's a data scientist at LinkedIn. We got Alex Nunez. He is a cybersecurity advisor at UpGuard. And Pat Showalter. She is a former council member here in Mountain View. Anyway, we're going to start off. Margaret, you're going to be the first one to answer this. First question, 2 minutes. The council approved a plan for almost 10,000 new homes in North Bayshore in 2017. But so far, only a few hundred have received entitlements. Are you committed to making sure the 9,850 new homes in the North Bayshore plan get built? And how would you make that happen? So getting homes built in North Bayshore, Mayor Margaret Abe-Koga.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having this forum and having me part of it. It's great to have an opportunity to chat with all of you. So yes, so North Bayshore, the precise plan, we passed it in 2017 unanimously, and it does allow for up to 10,000 homes. We have had a couple of projects in the pipeline. We actually will be looking at another one in a month or two. It's an affordable housing project by Eden Housing. The challenges with the North Bayshore area are really the fact that there's very little infrastructure. And so, you know, for me, I've actually, in my time, I am the one candidate that has actually approved more housing units than any other candidate. I've only said no to one project, and I've seen like hundreds of projects in front of me. But the issue here is about building communities, building neighborhoods, not just putting housing units down. And that's been the challenge. So for a city, our job is to plan and to zone and rezone, and that's what we did with the North Bayshore Precise Plan. But in terms of actually building the units, that's really up to the developer world. And that's the real challenge, is it has to be feasible, it has to be frankly profitable for them. And we do have requirements. We have community benefit requirements. There is no school out there. There's very little transit out there. So we are asking that we have the infrastructure to be built along with the housing. And I think that's the biggest barrier. I know some talk about the gateway as a artificial barrier. For me, frankly, there's a business there that wants to stay. And so if we can work around it, and I would expect the developers to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. And so John, coming next to you, how do we get more homes built in North Bayshore?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to SV at Home and the other organizations for putting this on. Yeah, so I guess we're going into records. I'll just humorously joke around a little bit. So we heard a candidate who has only said no to one housing development. I guess I've never said no to any housing development. This is the first time I'm running for office. So just a little bit of humor there. I agree, like we have zoned by and large correctly in North Bayshore. And, it is a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem. Which comes first? Is it the infrastructure or is it the development proposals? The development proposals are coming slowly. I would like to see the city take a more proactive approach to investing in infrastructure there, transportation, for example, or parks or schools to get the development process going. In addition, I think the city should really, this is kind of a gut check moment, because we have zoned correctly for thousands and thousands of units which are not being built. We have to ask ourselves when we're ready to consider public ownership, commissioning housing ourselves, not necessarily to run ourselves, but we could step in as a stakeholder ourselves as a city. if we're really committed to our two housing development growth areas, North Bayshore and East Wisman, then I would like to see the city step in as a stakeholder if the private market is not willing to do that. And so I put public housing on the table on my platform, and that's something that I will be exploring as a city council member if I'm elected. And yeah, that's my thoughts on North Bayshore.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. Yeah, next, Alex, we're going to you. So, how do we get more homes built in North Bayshore?
Yeah, absolutely. A barrier is a barrier, whether it's artificially introduced or not. The reality is, for those who don't know what the Gateway site is, it's a plot of land out over by Shoreline. Currently, the movie theater, is in that area. If you need to kind of locate yourself. And we actually have seen SciWest, which owns one part of the property, and Google, which owns another, have a very hard time coming to any kind of agreement on how they want to develop that. And the reality of the current situation is no one needs to be reminded, a major housing crisis in terms of shortage of supply. And so, in my opinion, leadership sometimes means making the call when you are in a position to do so, and sending this back to further negotiations, or in saying, hey, we're going to use more time from our overworked city staff, which are leaving. Our city staff is quitting, and that's a huge problem for our community development department. And saying we're gonna go ahead and show them or make them work on a new master plan for the area that probably won't get buy-in from Google or SciWest either. That is a barrier. Whether it's good intentioned, whether it's not good intentioned, doesn't matter, because it's a barrier that's going to slow the housing we need right now. In my opinion, leadership means you survey the field, you see what needs to be done, and you make a call. And that's what I would do on city council. With regards to the schools, I agree that is an absolutely necessary thing we need out there. And there are pools of money, funds that are available to the city that haven't been tapped into, that need to be tapped into, because the city made this plan, not the school district. And so we need to be good partners with them as well.
Thanks, Alex. So Pat, yeah, this question goes to you. How do we get more homes built in North Bayshore?
That's a great question. First of all, I'd like to say that I was elected in 2014 with two other people. And what really distinguished us from the other candidates is that we wanted housing built in the North Bayshore. The city council had just passed a general plan without it, and that had been a very contentious thing. And we felt that it needed to be there because, for all sorts of environmental reasons and because of the housing crisis, we wanted to have housing near jobs. And that was the way to do it. And the other thing about housing in the North Bayshore that's so advantageous is it really won't displace any existing people, because what happens is we're tearing down some old office buildings and rebuilding on that site. So that's really important. What I think that the gateway issue is a real one. The city, it's true, SciWest and Google didn't see eye to eye on what should be done at the gateway. And so the city council decided to have a consultant do a master plan. And they said that until the gateway had been developed, that the rest of the area couldn't be developed. I think that that's a very artificial barrier. And if we put up a very artificial barrier, we have the power to take it down. So that's what we need to do. The other thing we need to do is we need to work through all the problems that arise. There are always financing problems. There's always infrastructure problems. I mean, building something, especially new neighborhoods, is like a huge 3D puzzle. And you have to get all the pieces right. And we can do that, but we have to apply ourselves, and we have to be willing to say, yes, we want to make this happen, not put artificial barriers up. So I'm really looking forward to helping to get that housing accomplished.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. And so, yeah, thank you everyone for your answers. Our next question also for 2 minutes. You know, do you support Mountain View's rent control ordinance or the CSFRA? Should mobile homes be covered under the CSFRA? And are there other ways you think it should be changed or updated, or you know, should any changes be made to the rental housing committee? And we'll go first over to you, Pat. You know, do you support rent control? Should we update it or change it? And what about mobile homes?
Yeah, you know, I was on the council when the whole rent control controversy came before us, and we heard literally hundreds of people talk about how they were being displaced and evicted because they couldn't pay the increasing rents. So yes, I am a strong proponent of rent control. And I think it's important to say that this is rent stabilization. This isn't the rent control of the 50s. This is a balanced approach so that landlords can make a reasonable rate of return and want to stay in the business, because of course it's very important that they do that, and so that tenants are protected as well. So I think basically it's a sound law. It got off to a bit of a rocky start, but I think we've worked through those. The main thing that's still in the public conversation is whether or not mobile homes should be covered. And yes, I think they should, because there's ground rent associated with pretty much every mobile home. And I really see that as very similar to the rent for an apartment. So I think they should be covered. It's crucial to appoint people to the rental housing committee that are committed to make it work. I also think it's very, very important to have those people be Mountain View residents. That was one of the things that was included in Measure D, was potentially allowing people who weren't from Mountain View to serve on the rental housing board. And that was roundly defeated, and I was very glad to see that. So yes, I'm a strong proponent of rent control. And I think to a large degree, it's our best protection against gentrification and to protect the diversity and inclusiveness of our community. And that's one of the things that most Mountain View people treasure.
Thank you, Pat. All right, and then next we'll go to you, Alex. You know, do you support rent control? Should mobile homes be covered, or anything else changed?
Yeah. So in terms of my record of support for rent stabilization in Mountain View, back in 2016 and 15 when it was on the ballot, I was one of the key volunteers for that campaign. I've helped organize grassroots efforts to protect this law. I served as co-lead for the No on Measure D campaign this last March, which won with 70% of voter support, to protect this law against an attack from our current city council. And the reality is that when rent stabilization passed in Mountain View, which started when our low-income Hispanic working community came together to talk to each other about the high rents and decided to use our city charter to enable protections for ourselves, when it passed, we depended on our city council to appoint good people to the RHC. And by good, I meant people who were committed to making the law function as it was intended to. And the 4-3 majority on the city council, with two of the incumbents that are running today, decided to appoint a property owner, a property manager, and a person who has a documented record of being paid for anti-rent control campaigns in other cities. So, just because they were appointed doesn't mean, they're gonna undermine it, let's give them a chance. And they did undermine it. They took rent control away from mobile homes, which is by far, in my opinion, one of the worst injustices, because people who live in mobile homes typically are senior citizens and low income. And if I get elected, I see this as two issues. One, we need to correct the injustice of these protections having been taken away from our mobile home residents. But at the same time, we need to respect the will of the people to determine their own course. And the people twice now have decided and said, this is what we want, and we need a council who reflects that decision.
Great, thanks, Alex. And then let's go to you, John. What do you think about Mountain View's rent control law? Do you think it should be changed, or updated? And then what about mobile homes?
Thank you. Great question. I do support the CSFRA, our rent control law. In 2016, I voted for it, and it's extremely important that it be in our charter because there was an alternative rent control provision, Measure W, in 2016 that would have been a mere ordinance. What we saw in 2016 was the people of Mountain View chose rent control in the charter, which was the correct decision, and that was borne out. The wisdom of that decision was borne out because the city council, in a hostile play to rent control, did make some very bad appointments to the rental housing committee, like you've heard other candidates talk about. And the fact is, those were bad appointments who made bad decisions about the implementation of the CSFRA, including not extending to mobile home residents. We need to extend rent control to mobile home residents in Mountain View, but more importantly, what would I do about that? We had a bad decision, which were bad appointments, and how do we have a corrective decision from that? As a city council member, I would vote to appoint only renters to the rental housing committee to make sure we have a fair implementation now as a corrective action for rent control in Mountain View. I do support, so like I said, I do support rent control for mobile home residents. It's important to take action on that from day one on the city council, be it through an ordinance, through appointing people to the rental housing committee who will do that. I do support a change to the CSFRA. In the CSFRA, one of the final sections talks about decontrol, or when it would not apply. And the rental housing committee can choose to take rent control off the table if the vacancy rate goes above 5%. I think that should not apply during an emergency like the pandemic when we need rent control more than ever. So down the road, I think we should reconsider making rent control permanent for Mountain View to make it stronger for our renters.
Awesome, thanks, John. Margaret, what do you think about the city's rent control law? Should it be changed or updated? And then what about mobile homes? Should mobile homes be covered?
So I did not support Measure B. I supported Measure W, which was the alternative, which Pat Showalter actually led the campaign on. And to me, that one was more balanced. I think the challenge with Measure V, and I actually did not support it in large part because it was a charter amendment. And after implementing it for the last now 4 years, we've seen that it has some issues, one including mobile home parks. It actually does not talk about mobile home parks in Measure V. I know that the campaign was, saying that it would, but there's language in the ballot argument that says that it would help to create similar protections for mobile home park residents, but it doesn't say that Measure V covers mobile homes. So these are some of the issues that have come up. There's others in terms of just the challenge of not being able to provide a guarantee for folks. We want to do a seismic retrofit program for a lot of these soft story buildings, but we're not able to guarantee a recovery on the costs. And so that was what Measure D was. It wasn't to dismantle Measure B, frankly, it was to try to make it work better. And when Measure B was being touted, it was touted as a balanced approach. And that was what the Rental Housing Committee was supposed to be as well. I would not put all renters on the committee because that's not balanced. And it has, strict provisions on who can serve. With Measure D, we had included the possibility of a representative from the property owner community if there was not a qualified person in Mountain View to serve, that someone from outside could be considered. So I just want to get the facts straight here. And I think there's just a lot of misunderstanding going on. And in terms of mobile home parks, I've actually always supported rent stabilization for mobile homes, but I would prefer to do it by ordinance.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Margaret. All right, for our next question, we're talking about anti-displacement. And so we want to know, what strategies would you all like to see as a part of an anti-displacement measure for lower income residents in Mountain View? And we'll start off with you, Alex. What type of policies do you want to see as a part of Mountain View's overall anti-displacement strategy?
So this question actually hits at the core of why I'm running. Over the last few years here, we've seen that the city council has been approving the demolition of our existing affordable housing, and instead we get luxury ownership townhomes, $1 million plus, that none of the people who were once living here can actually afford. And to me, this is where economics has to also include a moral approach, right? Many of the reasons why I hear, hey, this is what has to be done, is because rent control supposedly creates an incentive not to maintain properties and to sell them off, or because technically it meets all the zoning standards and requirements, and so that's totally fine. But the truth is that the city council, the California Supreme Court has over and over again held up the police power that cities have to tend to the general welfare of their residents, and that includes and has broad discretion over land use decisions. And so I have led the fight here in Mountain View against displacement. Over the years, I've gone down onto the ground floor, organized tenants at risk of displacement when their properties come up for a redevelopment in our project pipeline. And I've worked to inform them of the land use policies and the political and legislative landscape of our city so that they can come out and ask their city council to protect them, not just property rights. But this continues to fail to happen because there are many property interests on our city council today. You can go look at the Mountain View Voice today and see it on the front page. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we extend right of return protections to tenants. We need to make sure that we require the replacement of any new unit, any units that were demolished to be replaced so those tenants can exercise the right of return to come back to that. And we need to have the political will to densify so that developers can make a return on their risk, and two birds, one stone, protect people, get more housing.
Thank you, Alex. And so, Pat, want to talk to you now. What policies should be a part of the City of Mountain View's overall anti-displacement strategy?
Very good question. Well, the first one I think is the CSFRA. It's really a foundational policy against displacement because it keeps the rents from rising at an astronomical rate. If people have, people know how much their rents are going to raise and it be raised, and they can plan for that. So that's one. A strong affordable housing program. We are always going to need to supply more affordable housing, and that's one of the things that's happened recently. The council has incorporated the law change that allowed that means that the units can be required to be built as new developments are built, and that's a good thing. So that's important. Really only allowing projects that increase the number of housing units. That really just needs to be, and we might even want to have a percentage of how much more, many more housing units have to be required. We should have a community conversation about that. Right of return is a good idea. We do have a strong TREO ordinance that gives tenants assistance with relocating. But the bottom line is we have just this incredible undersupply of housing, and we need to keep building it because it's basically a supply and demand problem. So those are some things. But I would love to hear more ideas about this. It's a very serious community problem.
Thank you, Pat. And apologies, I think we got our timer started a little late.
Yeah, I was thinking it was
yeah, but thank you so much, Pat. And so let me see, and then let's go to you, Mayor Abe-Koga. What policies would you like to see as a part of the city's overall anti-displacement strategy?
Thank you. So we've actually been working on this very recently. We even talked about it the other night at our council meeting relative to our R3 zoning. And what we're looking at is changing, going from number of units per acre density numbers to a form-based code that could hopefully allow for more units to be built in our R3 zoned areas. And we would do it with design, and design is a big part of how density can be done well. You know, based on design, you could have a very dense project, but as long as it looks good and it fits in the neighborhood, it could actually happen. And we've projected that by doing this change to form-based code with our R3 zones, we can add another 12,000 units to the city. So we're talking about that. The replacement units, as someone else mentioned, that's really challenging. You know, SB 330 has that in it. And frankly, what it's done is it's halted development because it's deemed as unfeasible. So we're looking at, however, like longer term after SB 330 ends, what is a more feasible replacement requirement? So that's in discussion as well. I agree, affordable housing, BMR units, below market rate units, is key. During my time, we went from about 500 units to now what we have is 2,000 plus another 500 in the pipeline. We just talked about lot 12 in downtown that will be doing 120 units on, and we have 3 or 4 or 5 projects total in the pipeline. So that's a good way to provide affordable units. And then, as mentioned, we do have a very strong tenant relocation program. We were one of the first cities to do that. I was on the council when we started it. And so, you know, for those who do need to relocate, we have a very, very strong program. So I think we're doing a lot. It's in the works, but it should be happening soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Margaret. And then, yes, for you, John, you know, talking about anti-displacement, what policies would you like to see as a part of the city's anti-displacement strategy?
Thanks. We've heard a lot of good ideas and agreement, so I'll go through some of the points on which I agree. A right of return for displaced tenants is important. Feasible replacement housing levels are important, either now or at the 2025 when SB 330 sunsets. We should explore raising the inclusionary zoning requirement for below market rate housing and development. We're seeing encouraging signs in the East Wisman area from Google, and I think we can probably go higher than we are. And one area that I want to consider is directing staff to investigate and denominate the cost of displacement, because when we have displacements due to, say, inability to pay the rent, that triggers some expenditure of county or city funds to help that process, help people who may become homeless. And we can really study that, have a finding, and use that as leverage when working with the county to avoid displacement, like directly support people who are at risk of not being able to make their rent payments, especially this critical time during the pandemic. I do want to do more work to avoid demolitions. We had last month, I think it was September 22 City Council meeting, a great conversation about what the city can do. We heard from the Public Works Director. If you study the properties that are at risk of demolition, the more quote unquote naturally affordable housing, that means the older housing in need of rehab, the city can step in as a potential buyer in lieu of a displacement. The city can perform a rehab, and the city can own this housing to keep it permanently affordable. So again, I want to put municipally owned housing on the table and be really serious about keeping our properties permanently affordable. We heard the city council can't be a landlord, but it already is. We have a portfolio of commercial rental properties right now.
Thank you, John. All right, and so the last 2-minute question here. You know, Mountain View has done a lot better than you know, neighboring cities in terms of producing housing and meeting its affordable housing goals. So the draft goals for the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, for the next 8 years are going to be more than 3 times higher, with about 11,000 housing units needed by 2031. So what's your plan for Mountain View to meet these higher housing goals? And so we're going to ping back to you, John, talking about, you know, meeting our housing goals, in particular our affordable housing goals in Mountain View.
Okay, so I think we have had some discussion, and we will probably have agreement that our R3 or multifamily zones can be denser, and we can achieve some densification there, which I'm in favor of. we can make it easier to add ADUs. Right now, it's not a completely streamlined process, but we could direct city staff to work with people who want to add ADUs or those accessory dwelling units to their property. Additionally, we can make use of our commercial properties, which are underutilized, or, right now we're seeing some, I'm reading in The Voice, we have some businesses who are struggling to make their lease. They want to get out of the lease, they're moving, and the land value is not being realized, right? So the city can step in as a partner and negotiate. Right now, one of the things that makes Mountain View such a great city economically is we have a portfolio of 22 rental properties. We get a steady stream of income from that. And I would like to expand that, especially right now as land values are maybe, questionable due to commercial activity drop during the pandemic. So the city can come in to assume ownership there. Additionally, I did appreciate on Tuesday in the City Council the presentation and the exploration of form-based codes. It appears that form-based codes could be a way to really streamline and expedite our permitting process. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Yeah, thank you, John. And so, yeah, Margaret, talking about, increasing our affordable housing supply and just housing supply overall, how can we meet these higher goals coming in the next 10 years?
Well, so contrary to a lot of other cities, I was actually pleased with the number because it came in lower than I was expecting. And with the 15,000 units that we have zoned for already, we can probably meet these, the number of 10, might even be lower than 10, but in that range. I am hearing though that the state may start to pick at the parcels and, try to decide if it's deemed, buildable or not. We have zoned for some flex zones because there are properties that have businesses that are doing well and we don't want to push them out, but we were planning for the future. So the question is going to be if they accept those or not. I think they should. I think we're actually thinking ahead, and I would hope the state would follow us. So that might be an issue, but with 15,000, I think we're going to be able to meet our goals. We also have 7,500 units in our pipeline already in development. The challenge really is going to be during this recession. I don't know how much building is going to happen. I was mayor in 2009 during the Great Recession, and I saw about 2 to 3 years where nothing got built, even though we had tons of units approved. So that's going to be the challenge. That's where we got behind as a state, and that's where we might get behind again. And again, that's not the city's responsibility. It's up to the developers to build. So I just want to make sure, we place the responsibility in the right place. And I feel like all the state legislation that's been happening has been focusing on the cities, and rightfully for some cities, but for a city like Mountain View that's been doing our part, I've been saying, can we be given more affordable housing funds so we can do the affordable part. I do agree with ADUs. We just actually loosened our regulations on Tuesday to match state law, so it should be easier to do. And then form-based code, as I mentioned, 12,000 more units. So we have a lot in the pipeline, and I think we're going to be able to meet our goals. Thanks.
Thank you, Margaret. And then Pat, talking about increasing our affordable housing production and just housing production overall, how can we meet these higher goals for 11,000 new units in Mountain View?
Well, I think Margaret's right. We have zoned aggressively and appropriately. And so if we can facilitate getting these built, then we will meet these goals. But that's a big question, getting developers to actually do that. Financing is difficult. Making sure that the city process is perceived as being easy enough to go through, so developers will choose to do it here versus somewhere else. We've gotten a bit of a reputation of being difficult to work with. I think we need to work on that a lot and streamline our processes. So I think that it is doable, but but we need to be the kind of city and be the kind of city government where we encourage developers and we work through the problems, and we make people want to come here and develop. And you know, these plans include some wonderful neighborhoods. They really do. They have some great amenities. So there will be, you know, wonderful features for those of us who were already here, as well as, you know, new people who can move into them. I think we, you know, with this, we just really have to stick with the 3 Ps: protect, produce, and preserve. And another thing that is always tough is the middle group. The last few years, we've done okay in the affordable housing. We've done very well in the high-end housing, and we've done terribly in the middle housing. So we need to, and this has been talked about a lot, but it is something that we really need to work on, is having more entry-level home ownership housing. Stacked flats for condos is something I think, I hope that will be more in our future.
Thank you, Pat. And so, yeah, and last goes to you, Alex. You know, meeting these affordable housing goals and overall housing goals. You know, how can we get it done in the next 10 years?
There's 2 parts to it. One is what you're able to do and apply locally, both as your own city council person and with your colleagues, and what you push for. And there's also, you know, people that we need to have the macroeconomic, regional, statewide level type of vision, right? With regards to the local aspect of it, absolutely, I'm a huge proponent of form-based zoning. And what we're gonna need, because the next city council is gonna vote on this, we need people in city council that we can trust to truly take form-based code seriously as a measure to maximize housing. I'm not running on preserving neighborhood character, right? What I want is better neighborhoods with equity at their heart that people can actually move into and increase diversity in our city. That's what I'm running on. So locally, I want to make sure that, you know, we're very aggressive with the choices that we're going to be making in the future that are coming up the pipe. But then also on the regional macroeconomic, you know, kind of even just the way people orient themselves, right? We have to recognize that some of our neighbors may not be doing the right thing, as some of, you know, the other candidates have said, which is true. I believe that we're doing more of the right thing than many of the people, or, you know, of our colleagues in the region. But you know, when it comes down to it, there are efforts at different levels, in particular, like SB 50, right, which last year was a big issue, and a lot of concerns about zoning and preserving single-family zoning. All right, I was at a city council meeting last year. You know, it was like 11:59 or something like that. And you know, during the very last bit, where city council members get to just talk about anything that may be on their minds, they were thinking, hey, what if we hired a lobbyist to go to Sacramento and kill SB 50? Let's join that battle. That's the wrong battle to fight. We should be saying, hey, how can we pay for a lobbyist to go to Sacramento to improve this bill so that cities like Mountain View that are doing the right thing get to keep their zoning, but we make sure that other cities have to do the right thing too. That's leadership.
Gotcha. Thank you so much, Alex. All right, so now we're just going to be moving on to some of our rapid fire questions here. And so these questions are just going to be a plain yes or no. You know, realistically, folks are going to add like a sentence or something. But, you know, if you could keep it to yes or no. So rapid fire. And so first question. Do you support Prop 15, the schools and communities first measure? We'll start with you, Mayor Margaret. Yes or no, Prop 15?
Yes.
And then John, yes or no, Prop 15?
Yes on 15.
All right. And then Alex, yes or no on 15?
Yes on 15. We've got to help commercial property taxes. That's a whole other issue, but yes.
Thank you. And then Pat, yes or no on 15?
Another yes.
All right. And so now we're talking about Prop 16, ending the state's ban on affirmative action. Mayor Abe-Koga, do you support Prop 16? Yes or no?
Yes, I do. I believe I'm a product of it, although it is a challenging topic in the Asian American community, and I think there needs to be more work done to be more inclusive of all communities of color.
Good job fitting that into a sentence. And then John, yes or no on Prop 16?
Yes on 16, we need affirmative action.
Great. And then Alex, yes or no on Prop 16?
Yes.
Thanks. And then Pat, yes or no on Prop 16?
A resounding yes. I would not have been able to go to Berkeley and get an engineering degree without it. So yes.
Awesome. Thank you. And so now next one is talking about Measure RR, the Caltrain funding tax. And Mayor Margaret, do you support the Caltrain tax? Yes or no?
Yes, I do. I'm actually a signatory on the ballot rebuttal, I believe, and it should have been actually, I believe it should have been placed 10 years ago when Caltrain was in trouble back then.
Got it. And thank you so much. And John, Measure RR for Caltrain, yes or no?
Yes on RR, and we need to get even better funding sources and governance too.
Got it. And then Alex, Measure RR Caltrain tax, yes or no?
Yes, but I also agree that we need to stop doing regressive taxes to fund transit and do progressive corporate taxation for it.
Gotcha. And then Pat, yes on Measure RR.
Yes.
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 Okay. Sorry, I'm feeding you the answer there. And so last one, this is going to be a 1-minute response. So we're talking about Measure C. It's the Narrow Streets Ordinance, commonly referred to as the RV ban. Do you support Measure C? And so we'll start with you, Mayor Margaret. Talk about Measure C. You got 1-minute response.
That's hard to do in 1 minute, but yes, I do support Measure C. It goes hand in hand with our safe parking lots. We have to incentivize folks to use our lots, and so we do need to have restrictions on our streets to do that. We also have the safe parking lots, which is we're the city with the largest program now. I believe we've surpassed San Jose even, which is 10 times larger than us, with over 100 spaces for vehicle dwellers. And on top of that, we just received the Project Home Key state grant to build a modular transitional housing project that will be up and running by the end of this year. And that should be helping about 300 homeless families within a year. So that with our safe lots, we will be able to help about 450 homeless individuals. And we have, our last count, we had 600. So within 2 years, we could potentially be helping everyone. So I think it's time, we have a plan. So it's time to put in the restrictions.
Gotcha. And so John, same question. You have 1-minute response. Yes or no on Measure C?
I'm a no on C, and I'm a yes to continuing to build our safe parking program and the transition housing out of homeless vehicle dwelling in Mountain View. Now is not the time to pass Measure C, the Narrow Streets Ordinance, the RV ban, what have you. The fact is, the Narrow Streets Ordinance was passed at a time we didn't know to all the streets it would apply. We didn't have a plan in place for the safe parking program. It was well into the future after implementation when it would be passed. And that's why I organized the Silicon Valley DSA campaign to contribute to the signatures. We collected about 1/3 of the signatures to put this question to the voters. The fact is, passing Measure C would take a lot of money for implementation, over $1 million for signage and street measurement. We should spend that money on the safe parking program, on transition housing. It is not the time during a pandemic to be considering moving or displacing our homeless population.
Gotcha. Thank you, John. And so Alex, talk about Measure C, yes or no on Measure C, 1 minute here.
Yeah, I'm a firm no. And this is what I was alluding to earlier, that we need people on the council who see the interconnectedness of all of these issues and why they're happening at the root, instead of fighting over the branches of it. For 40 years, from the 60s up until the early 2000s, even until today, we didn't build the housing that people needed to actually be able to be housed. And one thing that I really wonder is whether any of the proponents outside of a police ride-along have gone to these, where these people are living and actually try to talk to them. because the reality is that there are working people here in Mountain View. I've met them. You know, they're gardeners, they're cooks, security guards. And as a community, as an economy, we're demanding their labor, but then saying, no, you've got to skedaddle, and we're going to call you some of the worst things you can be accused of baselessly on your way out. The reality is that we don't have a solution yet. A plan is not a solution. We need to make sure that our safe parking sites, that this Project Home Key, are actually transitioning people into housing, whether it's here in Mountain View, whether it's elsewhere, and we need to build the housing here too to get people in. That's when restrictions come in place, if at all.
Gotcha. Thank you, Alex. So Pat, you know, talk about Measure C. Do you support it? And we got 1 minute to respond.
No, I don't support it. I think it's the wrong time to do this. I don't think that it's a good thing for people to be living in RVs on the streets. People need to be stably housed. And when I was mayor, I led an effort to increase our efforts to help our homeless populations with the idea of preventing homelessness in the first place and getting people moved off the streets. That's continued. Safe parking went at just at a glacial pace until the county stepped in recently and fixed a legal problem that allowed us to now have RVs parked 24 hours a day instead of just 12. So that's made a huge difference. It's made the safe parking work, and thank you to the county for doing that. We need to keep doing that. We need to get more caseworkers to help people who are in our safe parking or homeless find stable housing.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much, Pat. And so now we're going to switch over to a few additional questions here. Looks like some audience Q&A questions. So the first question it regards affordable housing and basically the cost. Now, affordable housing can be very expensive. It often is. What steps, if any, would you take to create more funding for affordable housing developments here in Mountain View? Mayor Margaret, we'll start with you. You know, how can we get more funding for affordable housing in Mountain View?
Yes, thank you. So we do have the business license tax, and a portion of that we have designated for housing, affordable housing projects. It's not a lot. It's only about $5 million total. So we get, I think we said about 10% would go to affordable housing. A long time ago, when I was earlier on council, we actually had done a poll about a parcel tax. And that had passed at a certain amount. And so that's something that we could consider. We have something called the TOT tax, the Transit Occupancy Tax, and ours is one of the lowest in the county. We can certainly look at increasing that. It would have to go to the ballot in 2 years' time. And some of that funding we've been looking at potentially for our sustainability projects, but we could look at putting some of that to housing as well. You know, with our affordable housing projects, we are looking at, and we've been able to fund quite a bit because of our housing impact fees that we have across the board. That was something that we were the first to implement again, and back in 2008 or 9 or so in my time. But now that we require BMR units to be built, that funding may dry up, but we will get the units. So I think there's many opportunities to continue to increase our affordable housing projects. And as I mentioned, we already have 5 in the pipelines now. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret. And apologies, I think we late implemented that timer. But I think we'll keep it around to, let's keep it at 2 minutes. Can we shift over to the 2-minute timer? Thanks. Thanks so much. Okay, great. And so let's go over to John. John, how do we get more funding for affordable housing in Mountain View?
Right. So we've heard some great ideas. We do have the business licensing tax, and it is not a huge amount for affordable housing. I think we should expand that. I'm on the record saying that both to get through the pandemic as well as to get beyond it, we should expand our corporate taxation, because many of our, Mountain View is a great place to live and work. We have many large employers who are still in operation, meeting their revenue goals. I know I worked for one, and so we have Google, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Intuit, Pure Storage, et cetera. And we should consider more aggressive corporate taxation right now, both to get through the pandemic and then could be allocated for other purposes such as affordable housing afterward. We do need to aggressively build the housing we have zoned in our 2 growth areas, North Bay Shore and East Wisman, and we should consider raising the inclusionary zoning fraction of that. We are seeing some good signs from Google that they are volunteering at a higher rate currently, so we can continue to lean into that. I'm not in favor of a parcel tax because that would be not on the improved land value, you know, that would be more of a regressive tax. So I would not go down that route. And finally, like I've said a couple times, I want to promote city-owned public housing. And I think we can do that in a way that is cross-subsidized. So if we have a development in a great area where, you know, high and low and medium income people want to live, the rents paid by each could cross-subsidize the other. And that's a sustainable idea to consider in the long term, something that I want to promote if I win on the city council.
Thank you, John. And so, Alex, you know, talking about affordable housing funding in Mountain View. So how would you increase funding for affordable housing projects here?
Yeah, I think if the goal of the question is to understand how do we increase more affordable housing, then I actually think that, you know, this, you know, the approach of going through the public purse, it's just not going to get us there, right? And not only that, but I actually find it unfair. You know, I am very tired of the public ponying up for the lack of a good that many private entities had a massive role in creating, if not the leading roles. Do I support, you know, purchasing homes from the city? Yes. Do I support, you know, having a tenant opportunity to purchase where tenants can, you know, have a right to bid on their property in league with other nonprofits and public sources of money? Yes, absolutely. But what I think we need to do is that we need to stop, we need to have the political will and courage to make the development community actually account for the costs that are right now being externalized onto the public purse. When people get displaced, when developers tear down 20 apartments and set up 18, when people have to drive for hours from Gilroy or Stockton and poison our air with more fires, that's a cost to all of us that developers currently are not being asked to externalize, to account for. You know, should we increase density? Should we increase height and give them something that they can make a return on in terms of, you know, market conditions? Yes. That's where I think we need to go. I think we need to create the market conditions for developers to actually be able to develop these affordable units. Do we really need parking requirements? I think that's something we should think about. Do we need to upzone? Yes, absolutely. You know, I think we need to create the private market conditions that will incentivize developers to actually build these affordable units. And that's where I'm coming from. And, you know, I think we should also make sure that we aggressively protect people through all these policies, not just property rights and profit.
Well, thank you, Alex. And so, Pat, you know, how do we increase funding for affordable housing projects here in Mountain View?
Well, Mountain View was one of the first communities locally that had housing impact fees. I was on the EPC in the 90s when we developed those, and it's one of the things I'm really proud of. It's resulted in more than 1,400 affordable housing units, and as we've heard, a lot are in the pipeline, so that's good. The other thing is Mountain View has a really expert staff at putting together funding. I don't think I've ever seen an affordable housing project that didn't have at least 8 sources of funding. It's really, really complicated, but I don't think we're going to do this locally. I think what we really need to do is and hopefully, you know, we're going to have a Democrat in the White House, and this is going to make a big difference. We need to go to the feds and we need to get the taxes changed. So the housing tax credits that are, you know, really one of the major funding sources for affordable housing are just much more plentiful. They put a cap on how many of those tax credits are available. And I'm sure that the the good folks at Silicon Valley at Home could tell us much more about the details than I can related to this. But I think this is one of the things where we need to lobby the feds and the state to increase the tax advantages to corporations who want to put money into this. That's what I think that's the best thing we could do.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat. And I just want to check real quickly, does anyone have a hard stop at 8? Does anyone? Okay. All right. In that case, let's get on over just to closing statements. I think we have enough time to just do a 1-minute closing statement per candidate. So let's start with you, Margaret. Can you give a 1-minute closing statement, please?
I was hoping you'd go backwards, but that's okay. Well, again, thank you for having me. It's great to chat about housing, our top issue of so many of us, our cities here in the Bay Area, as well as the country, that I've realized. And I've had the honor of being on the city council for 12 years and mayor this year during the pandemic. And I really am proud of the way that our city has responded. And, I've taken a hands-on approach to responding to the pandemic and civil unrest. We didn't talk about it, but we have the largest rent relief program in the county. So we are able to help folks pay their rent, and we've been able to help about 1,500 to 2,000 folks with that. As I mentioned, we have the safe parking lots. We've upped our food, hygiene, and safety assistance for low-income families and the homeless. And we're looking at, equity and inclusion and making sure that our service delivery models reflect that. So I think we've been a leader in housing. I look forward to continuing to work and continuing to keep our leadership in the area. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. And so, yeah, John, just a 1-minute closing statement from you.
Thanks to the SV at Home, the constituent orgs as well, for having the forum tonight and inviting us. It's been a great forum, and we've talked about housing, of course, for an hour. And I love that it's an issue that intersects all of the, everything we're doing as a city, as a municipality. And so we talked tonight about building more inclusionary housing. We're doing some things right. We are zoning correctly. We have a rent relief program, but we need to do more. We need to expand our rent and mortgage relief program to keep people in their homes. We need to ensure that our safe parking program is expanded and can afford all of our homeless vehicle dwelling population. And we need to pursue other issues of social and economic justice as well. So I invite you to follow up with me with any questions. Visit my website, votelashlee.com, and check out my platform on which I'm running. I'm running as a bold and honest progressive, and appreciate your support. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. And Alex, from you, just a 1-minute closing statement, please.
Yeah. So, I think that not only can we have land use policies that promote the market and the supply of housing, but that also protect people's well-being. Right? Not only do I think we can have this, I think we need to have this. Okay. And what I've been really galled by right now, in today actually, is just how much money is coming in from organizations like the California Apartment Association and the National Realtors to basically keep things the way they are today. And to me, that's not just, a matter of, politics as usual. I think we need to protect people to have a sustainable socioeconomic, environment for the foreseeable future. I am someone who has, earned my stripes, getting down with the community and fighting for more housing supply and for protection of people. At the heart, that's what I will bring to the city council, and I'm willing to take the actions necessary to truly get that done.
Thank you, Alex. And then, yeah, Pat, just a 1-minute closing statement for you tonight.
Well, thanks very much for having. I really admire the advocacy that Silicon Valley at Home does. And when I was on council, I really enjoyed taking part in it. So I hope to be able to do that again. I'm the only candidate that's been endorsed by the Mercury News, the Los Altos Town Crier, and The Voice. And I'm particularly proud of being endorsed by The Voice because The Voice covers every single Mountain View City Council meeting. So they know how all of the people that are candidates now perform, either as council members or as advocates. And so I think that one makes me particularly proud. Times are uncertain, so let's elect people we can count on. I've lived in Mountain View for 36 years and been very active in schools, a Girl Scout leader. I was on the EPC, the League of Women Voters, the League of Conservation Voters. I was mayor in 2016, and I continue to be active. I'm on the Alta Housing Board and the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. I'm persistent, pragmatic, and progressive, and I'd love your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pat, and thank you everyone for all of your responses tonight and for joining us. You know, these forums will be recorded and available on the Silicon Valley at Home website, so feel free to watch it there. But thank you all for joining us, and I hope you all have a good night and stuff.
Thank you, Sonya.